If you couldn't make a withy pot, you couldn't go fishing because you couldn't buy them. They didn't come off the shelf. You had to go and cut the withies in the winter and make them in the winter while the withies were green. And then you had your pots for the summer, and if a good gale of wind wrecked all the pots in the summer, you had nothing to fish with. Not easy. The last 10 withy pots we had 29 size lobsters out of them. 29 big enough. We wondered if we were doing the right thing by changing from withy pots to wire pots. But we did get the wire pots working, that they would catch just as well as the withy pots. I was into the so-so era. Previous to that, they'd used a lot of hemp, and it was strong but thin.
I mean, you know, the willow pot as you see it, what the men done was just ballast it, tied stones in the bottom and their ropes to the pot, and that was more or less it. They had 2 bait sticks, we used to call them, that, you know, you pegged your bait in the funnel. Well, I've done it hundreds of times in my early days.
We used to mend the crab pots with hazelwood. Then there'd be a skipper to put the bait on, to put in, well, that was made out of ash. And then the throw pins, what we used to put sticks up, where you put the oars in the row, and that was made of witch elm. You'd spend hours by the fireside night times making these skippers, and you'd do that in the winter.
When I first started, obviously, it was all willow crab pots, and that in itself was one of the first things that we had to achieve, is being able to make a crab pot. It was done in 2 stages, and generally speaking, as there was 2 men aboard the boat, one would make the top half and get better at making that side of it, and the other half would do the bottom. The morning crab pots were always much more neater and a little more smaller than the afternoon. I sometimes wonder whether it's to do they've been on a scrumpy or not over lunch. You could buy a whole willow grove. You didn't own it, you rented it off the local farmer or whoever for about £10 or whatever, like £20 or whatever it was. You could buy your whole seasons of willows for that amount of money, which made you 40 or 50 pots, which was about the average amount you used and had to be replaced every year. The sap out of the willow used to dry your hands up and cause cracks in the joints of the fingers, especially when you're trying to weave. Lanolin was one of the things that you used to use, but of course the point is it soon wore off. Rainwater is a lot softer than ordinary tap water. Urine is the softest of all. So that was one means of softening one's hands.
By the time I joined the firm in 1951, they were phased out and we were going over to wire pots. We had to keep the cane funnels. They then had come up with a method of putting wires into a stanchion, making the entrances with the willow, and then bending the wires over to hoops. And the hoops there'd be a small hoop at the top, and they would progressively get bigger till you got down to the base. And they would have these thick galvanized wires, and that's what developed after the willow. I was never very good at making pots, because I'll tell you what, you had to have a very strong grip. This galvanized wire, of course, they wanted it thick so that it could stand the strain of the sea. And really, you had to be very strong to get them to bend around the hoops. You had men who were skilled. We had one fellow, Roy Foster, and he was so good at it. And what we used to give him encouragement. If you can't give anybody anything else, give them encouragement. And we used to say, Roy, you make a beautiful pot. And we used to have him there 8 hours a day making pots.
When I started, we tended to net the willow pots, because in the old days, soon as a crab, if we couldn't get out for 4 or 5 days, some of them big male crabs would get angry and they'd bite a couple of the stanchions in the pot and everything would walk out the side of it. when the poor old fishermen went to sea after a week, they'd have nothing left. And then somebody decided to net a pot, partly because Browse Brothers were netting wire pots. Wire being the next model from willow. So they said, well, if they can net these wire pots, we can net a willow pot. So if the crab did happen to bite a couple stanchions out, it stopped them galloping out through the side, like, if you know what I mean. And you saved quite a bit of your catch. I mean, I never made a willow pot, and my father still made a few, but we started making wire ones. We were going with the times a bit more. I mean, Browse Brothers at painting, and some of the big boats were making wire. When I say wire, they had like wooden hoops. Instead of a cane funnel, you wove a cane funnel, but wooden hoops with the wires bent down over. They had twice the life of a willow pot, and were more designed for using in quantity on a big boat. You know, willow pots, you couldn't stack one on top of the other. When a willow pot was 6 months old, you'd probably squat him down, like, you know. They were getting worn, bitten about a bit and that. So we started going to wire pots, and when I started, you know, it was just becoming a rage. Like, you know, willow pots were sort of going out of existence. I still work alongside one or two men, that old timers that still used them. I mean, they were getting that old, they weren't going to wire pots anyway. They were getting close to retirement age. Like, so you went from growing your own willow, which you could only grow a certain amount, and make, say, 60 pots, which had to last you a whole season of 12 months before your next crop of willow came, to, if you had the money, you could make pots any day of the year and as many as you wanted. So, which was a good thing in a way. Like, they were first made with cane funnels, and then somebody came up with the idea of like plastic entrance. Well, they weren't plastic, they were fiberglass, the first ones. A chap out at Avett and Gifford used to make them by hand. So, you know, now when you see these black funnels, we call them funnels, some people call them entrances. B. Sands was always the funnel of a pot. Like, he started making fiberglass ones. Of course, the inside was, the resin was nice and smooth. They said, oh, they won't be able to climb out of them so quick. They did in the end. If you let them lie long enough, they'd get out all right. Yeah.
We was working wire pots and willy pots. We went to sea after 4 or 5 days lay, which meant that there was nothing in the pots. But one chap had experimented with putting sawn off pipes for funnels, and the crabs went in through that way but couldn't get out. Whereas with the cane, which was made in like a basket to make a funnel, they used to put their claws up and crawl out again. He started the funnels in Sorghum, and that particular day that I came in with no crabs, he came in with about half a dozen chests, and I thought, oh, you know, that's the way for me. So I started getting myself bits of pipe and experimenting, and it did work.
In the early days of when we changed over, it was still grass nets. Of course, then we went on to synthetics, and of course that made a big difference. But you'd be surprised how quickly the blooming crab will nip through even the plastic nets, you know, eventually. In the end, we found that Father started this by putting on a double net, and it improved the fishing of the pot as well, believe it or not. We've noticed this even with willow pots. If a crab is in a pot, if he's got a bit of cover, a bit of weed, he feels more secure and he won't bother to get out. And believe it or not, it will attract other male crabs together. So they are creatures of habit of needing company, which is most unusual.
When I first had a small boat, used to have flat bottom, like half round ones made with old wood battens. Go over to the old boatyard with a roder, and he'd cut you some battens for 5 shillings. Minis you could carry for £5, the offcuts of elm. Used to make them on those same hoops as that wire pot's made with. Nail the battens through and then put another hoop right over again to protect them. With them, it was a full-time job, especially with the size of nets. When I first started, I used to make nets at home when I was first married, because you couldn't buy it in a sheet or a roll. A fathom and a half long and 8 meshes wide. That's what they used to be. Make them tying on a doorknob. Mesh it up, size like that. Then we used to tar them, tar tank. They didn't last long. They go with like where the wires bend on the hoops. They always go there, and then you get like a hook come out and rip your oilskins.
Well, I suppose if you were lucky, you got a season out of them.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
But we used to bring them in and put more standards in them, the wires, repair them if we got squashed a bit.
When the wire pots first started, they didn't have a net. And then it seems that somebody put a net around them to strengthen up the old ones, and then found it caught better. And then the nets became standard after that.
Cobweb bottom I used to make, yeah, round and round like a cobweb.
Well, it went on then to weld mesh bottoms, and you get them, the cock crab would squeeze them right in.
Oh yeah, yeah. And that used to come in rows, and you cut your bottom out of a big sheet, it would come in rolled up. Spread it out on the store floor, put pattern on and mark them out and cut them all out.
Then Metherose from Plymouth, they started making
bottoms, yeah.
an interlaced. It was all crimped together and it was made into a woven lattice work. Plastic coated galvanized wire. And that worked very well, didn't it?
They were the best of the lot.
I mean, Metherose then started making an all-wire pot where your netting was wire.
Wire as well. We used to have wire pots with a cane funnel like that, to bait them with your skiver. Then somebody over at Dartmouth invented fiberglass funnels. And it used to put fiberglass funnels in wire pots to start with.
Later on, of course, Mr. Nantes from Weymouth, he invented his plastic pot, or the plastic frame. He demonstrated the first one he brought to Salcombe on Ken Richards Quay. He put the frame on the ground. He had a plank. So Ken said, yes, he had a plank. He put the plank on top of the pot. And he drove his van back up the plank. The plastic frame went down flat. And then he drove off and the pot came back upright again. I can remember that to this day. That was a long, long time ago. Everybody was speechless, which is unusual for fishermen especially. It made everybody very excited because the weight that they take when they're stacked on the boat, especially if you've got a stack of 3 high, 4 high, was quite significant. And with wire pots, when they got a bit weak, they'd go down. Of course, they'd stay down. And willow pots, you didn't want to put them on top of each other really at all.
I always remember Jeff Nantes coming down. He's a very inventive sort of boat. We went down to Salcombe for a demonstration of this pot, you see, this plastic pot. And this particular pot was made out of a black, an alkathene water pipe. But the trouble was with it that, as you can well imagine, trying to make a beehive-shaped pot, it needed bending the pots and making joints. So by actually welding, that's what he did, the joints, heating the plastic and creating a weld, made the plastic brittle. Of course, since ever it got a bit of knocking around, it used to break up. So Jeff realised this after a while, because everybody thought it was a good idea, as synthetic nets and everything was coming in. Jeff got hold of the manufacturer of this material, and he said, oh well, he said, we can make you a pure alkathene, which didn't have the carbon in it apparently, but it would be a lot more flexible. But when you put more plastic into these designs and the pot itself, it made it so light. So the next thing was that we used to go around to scrap merchants and get this, what they call it, reinforcing iron bars, you know.
And then, of course, the plastic pot came along. In the early days, all the fishermen used to just buy the frames, buy a big bundle of net, cut individual nets and mesh them up, you know, and you'd construct the whole pot from, like, kit form. But nowadays, with fishermen working so many, I mean, they tend to buy them ready to go. There are firms like Mike Cornish and several firms that you put order in for, say, if you want 20 made up. They're off the shelf, ready to go. But in the early days, we all, you know, bought the net, bought the frame, bought the bottoms. Car tires were cut up. Cool. I've cut hundreds of car tires myself up. We had like a little machine we'd bolt onto the door frame of a shed and used to pull the tire. You had to keep it sharp, and you'd, off a tire, you'd probably get about 40, 50 feet of rubber, you know. But all the bases were, as you know, bound in rubber. I mean, it was all expensive, but I always used to think the ones you made yourself, you took extra pains, you know, and you made a real good job of it, and they lasted that much longer, like, you know. Some people were a little bit more fussier than others, like, yeah. I used to think I could put together a good plastic pot, yeah, as good as anybody, I think. Being big-headed now, but yeah, I used to take a bit of pride in them, like, yeah. When they invented these plastic pots, they were like, the frames were bright blue. And you used to think, what the hell are you going to catch in that? In fact, I used to dip mine. We had to colour them like an old tar, big tank. Because I didn't like them blue, but after a few years I decided it was a waste of time. They went in the blue ones just the same, like, and it was bloody messy trying to, you know, discolour them, like, yeah.